The hydraulic hiss of Janet Morrison's tow truck punctured the pre-dawn silence at 5:42 a.m. She stood in her driveway, arms crossed over her work coveralls, watching the silver Mercedes SUV settle another 3 inches into what had been her driveway 12 hours ago. The emergency lights cast red shadows across the woman slumped in the driver's seat, phone pressed to her ear, mascara streaking her face. 4 months. 4 months of this entitled nightmare parking wherever she pleased, blocking Janet's pool maintenance business access, laughing when asked to move. But this morning was different. This morning, the 52-year-old former civil engineer had stopped asking nicely, and what Karen Westbrook didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the exhausted small business owner she'd been tormenting had spent the last 3 weeks transforming her own property into the perfect trap. Before we dive into how Janet turned to parking, spot into quicksand. If you love stories where entitled people finally meet physics and justice in equal measure, hit that like button and subscribe. Now let's see exactly how concrete clay and calculated revenge created the perfect sinkhole. This is a story in 3 parts. The violation that pushed a reasonable woman past her breaking point, the confrontation where an SUV became evidence, and the resolution where expensive lessons were learned in the most public way possible. The first outline takes us through Janet's nightmare summer. 4 months of a neighbor's entitled friend treating private property like personal parking. 4 months of a pool business owner unable to access her own gate. 4 months of police shrugging and saying, "It's a civil matter." We'll feel every ignored request, every mocking laugh. Every morning, Janet had to reschedule clients because a silver Mercedes blocked her commercial vehicle. We'll understand exactly why a woman who'd spent 30 years engineering municipal infrastructure finally decided to engineer something else entirely. Karen's comeuppance. The second outline delivers the confrontation Janet had been planning with engineering precision. We'll be there at 5:30 a.m. when Karen's SUV, parked illegally for the dozenth time, suddenly finds itself sinking into what appears to be a catastrophic foundation failure. We'll watch as Janet reveals she knows everything. Karen's full name, her husband's dental practice, their country club membership, and exactly why Karen thinks private property doesn't apply to her. The power shifts completely when Karen realizes the victim she's been bullying is actually a civil engineer who knows more about soil mechanics than Karen knows about consequences. The third outline brings the resolution with the satisfaction of watching physics and social consequences collide. We'll see the tow truck struggle, the gathering crowd of neighbors, the husband's arrival, and the revelation that transforms everything. Karen's expensive SUV becomes a very public monument to entitlement, complete with social media documentation, repair bills that match her arrogance, and a neighborhood reputation that will follow her for years. Justice, served with engineering specifications. Here's exactly how it happened. Janet Morrison had built her life on 2 foundations: solid engineering principles and honest hard work. At 52, the former city infrastructure engineer ran Morrison Pool Services from her home on Maple Ridge Drive, a quiet suburban street where she'd lived for 15 years. Her house sat on a corner lot with a privacy-fenced backyard containing her commercial pool equipment, chemical storage, and the heated saltwater pool she'd engineered herself. The business supported her after her husband's death 3 years prior, serving 43 residential clients across the county. Her white commercial van, emblazoned with her company logo, needed daily access through the side gate that opened directly onto her driveway. Everything worked perfectly until the afternoon of June 3rd, when Karen Westbrook discovered that Janet's driveway made an excellent overflow parking spot. The first incident seemed innocent enough. Janet returned from a morning service call to find a silver Mercedes GLE blocking her gate. She'd circled the block twice before parking on the street, hauling her equipment 60 feet farther than necessary. The SUV belonged to Karen Westbrook, a 46-year-old real estate agent visiting Janet's next-door neighbor, Diane Chen. Janet knocked on Diane's door, explained the situation politely, and waited 20 minutes while Karen finished her wine and gossip session before sauntering out. "Oh, was I in your way?" Karen had asked, voice dripping with performative concern. "I didn't think anyone actually used driveways during the day." She'd moved the Mercedes with exaggerated slowness, checking her makeup in the mirror before driving away. Janet had dismissed it as thoughtless, not malicious. She'd been wrong. 3 weeks later, it happened again. Janet arrived at 7:15 a.m. to load her van for the day's appointments and found the Mercedes blocking her gate again. This time, Karen's car sat there for 4 hours. Janet called Diane, who apologetically explained that Karen came over whenever she felt like it and refused to park on the street because she didn't want door dings from other cars. Janet missed 2 morning appointments, losing $300 in revenue and 2 clients who didn't appreciate being rescheduled. When Karen finally emerged at 11:30, she'd laughed at Janet's frustration. "Maybe you should leave earlier," she'd suggested, sliding designer sunglasses over her eyes. "Or, get a smaller van that fits in your garage." The garage that Janet used for equipment storage, as any legitimate business owner would. That evening, Janet had installed her first security camera. By August, the violations had become routine torture. Karen parked in front of Janet's gate at least twice a week, sometimes staying for hours, occasionally overnight. She'd expanded her territory to include the spot directly in front of Janet's driveway approach, forcing Janet to perform awkward 3-point turns that damaged her van's alignment. The August 15th incident broke something fundamental inside Janet. She'd returned from her mother's funeral in Ohio to find the Mercedes parked across her entire driveway entrance. Karen and Diane visible through Diane's front window, wine glasses raised in laughter. Janet had sat in her van for 40 minutes, crying from grief and rage, before Karen finally left at 9:47 p.m. without even glancing her way. The next morning, Janet found a scratch along her van's driver's side, fresh, deliberate, at Mercedes' side mirror height. That was when enough became action. Janet called the police 4 times. Officer Rodriguez's response never varied. "It's a civil matter, ma'am. We can't ticket vehicles on private property unless they're abandoned." "Have you tried talking to her?" Yes, Janet had tried talking. She'd tried notes on the windshield. Karen threw them away without reading. She'd tried confronting Karen directly. Karen had called her a bitter old woman who should learn to share. She'd tried calling Karen's real estate office. The receptionist had laughed and said, "Karen parks wherever Karen wants." The legal system designed to protect property owners had failed completely because Karen's violations lasted just short of the 72-hour abandonment threshold. The system wasn't built for someone who understood exactly how to abuse it. Janet's mindset shifted on August 20th during a sleepless night reviewing security footage. She'd spent 30 years engineering solutions to impossible problems, unstable soil, water table issues, foundation challenges that made other engineers quit. If the law wouldn't help her, physics would. She stopped calling police and started calling old colleagues. She spent 3 weeks researching Karen's background through public property records, social media, and the county assessor's website. She discovered Karen's husband owned Westbrook Dental Associates, that their home was valued at $1.2 million, that Karen drove the Mercedes as a weekend car and posted about it constantly on Instagram with hashtags like luxury life and car park where you want. Most importantly, Janet learned that Karen had never faced real consequences for anything in her privileged life. If Karen wanted to play games with private property, Janet would show her what happened when you parked on ground that a civil engineer had specifically prepared for your arrival. And on September 12th, after 3 weeks of careful preparation, everything was finally ready. The trap sprang at 5:30 a.m. on September 13th. Janet had been awake since 4, monitoring her security cameras, watching the Mercedes pull up at 5:18 a.m., Karen returning from what her Instagram story called an epic girls' weekend in Vegas. Through her window, Janet watched Karen stumble from the SUV, clearly hungover, and weave toward Diane's house. The Mercedes sat directly over the section of driveway that Janet had spent 3 weeks carefully preparing, loosening the soil underneath, removing structural support, creating a subsurface void that would hold exactly long enough. At 5:42 a.m., physics took over. The Mercedes's front wheels sank 4 inches with an audible crunch. Karen's head snapped up from Diane's doorstep. She ran to her vehicle, tried to drive forward, and sank another 3 inches. By the time Janet stepped outside in her Morrison Pool Services coveralls, the Mercedes was axle deep in what appeared to be catastrophic foundation failure. "Don't move it," Janet called out, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd managed construction crews for decades. "You'll damage the undercarriage worse." Karen's head whipped around, her expression transforming from panic to rage the moment she recognized Janet. "What did you do?" she shrieked, wobbling on her heels. "You sabotaged my car. I'm calling the police!" Janet pulled out her phone, thumbs moving with practiced efficiency. "Please do. I've already called my insurance company to report the damage to my driveway caused by your illegally parked vehicle. But while we wait, let me tell you what I know. Karen Elizabeth Westbrook of 4782 Birchwood Lane." The color drained from Karen's face faster than her SUV was sinking. Janet continued, consulting her phone with the casual precision of someone reading engineering specifications. Karen Elizabeth Westbrook, age 46, real estate agent with Prestige Properties, license number 847392. Married to Dr. Marcus Westbrook, Westbrook Dental Associates on Oak Street. 2 children, Brandon, 19, freshman at State University, and Madison, 16, junior at Riverside Prep, member of Lakeview Country Club where your husband sits on the finance committee. Janet looked up, meeting Karen's horrified stare. "Your Mercedes is registered to your husband's business for tax purposes, which means this incident involves commercial property damage. Your insurance? Platinum coverage through Westfield, policy number I have right here. And your address? The one where I'll be sending the bill for my driveway repairs, along with 4 months of documented evidence of criminal trespassing." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. "How do you can't—" Janet stepped closer, her voice dropping to a register that made Karen step back instinctively. "I'm a civil engineer, Karen. I spent 30 years accessing property records, permits, and county documents. It took me 3 hours to learn everything about you. Your social media helped tremendously, by the way, especially the posts about parking wherever you want because rules are for poor people. Those are screenshot and saved." She held up her phone, showing Karen her own Instagram posts. Time-stamped, geotagged, and captioned, all of them showing this exact location. Diane Chen appeared in her doorway, hair disheveled, taking in the scene with growing comprehension and horror. Janet didn't break eye contact with Karen. "Here's what's going to happen. You have 2 choices, and you're going to make this decision right now." She raised one finger. Option 1, I call the police, file formal trespassing charges for every incident I have documented. 47 times over 4 months. I file a civil suit for property damage, lost business revenue, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. My security footage, my client testimony about missed appointments, and your own social media posts become public record. Your real estate license gets reviewed when your employer learns you've been criminally trespassing. Your country club learns about it when I send them the court filings. And your husband learns about it when the process server arrives at his dental office. Karen had gone from pale to gray, her hangover forgotten in the face of systematic destruction. Janet raised a second finger. Option 2. You pay for the immediate tow truck recovery, which will cost around $800 given how deep you've sunk. You pay for my driveway repairs, which will run approximately $4,000 for structural restoration. You sign a notarized agreement never to park on, near, or within 50 feet of my property again, and you write a formal apology that I will frame in my garage. She paused, letting the weight of both options settle. If you choose option 2, this ends today. If you choose option 1, I promise you it will follow you for years. I'm very patient, Karen. I engineer long-term solutions. The leverage was absolute, and Karen knew it. Janet pulled up her security camera footage on her phone. 47 separate incidents, each showing the Mercedes blocking the gate, each time-stamped and dated. I also have your text messages to Diane, Janet added quietly. The ones where you called me a pathetic old bat and joked about claiming her driveway by adverse possession? Diane forwarded them to me last week. She's tired of being your enabler. Diane, still in her doorway, nodded confirmation with visible relief. Karen's face crumpled, the entitled mask finally cracking to reveal the fear underneath. I didn't mean, I was just... Janet's expression remained granite. You meant every bit of it. Now choose. Karen's voice emerged as a whisper. Option 2. Janet nodded once. Smart choice. The tow truck arrives in 10 minutes. My attorney arrives in 30 with the agreement. You'll sign it here in front of witnesses, and you'll write that apology while we watch. Then you'll never come back to this street again. She turned toward her house, then paused. Oh, and Karen? If you even think about retaliating, remember that I know where you live, where you work, and where your kids go to school. I also know that Riverside Prep has a strict parent conduct policy. It would be a shame if Madison's enrollment was affected by her mother's criminal behavior. Janet watched the final spark of defiance die in Karen's eyes. The tow truck driver's name is Mike. He charges by the hour. So I'd stop crying and start calling your husband if I were you. She walked back to her house, leaving Karen standing beside her sinking monument to entitlement, and smiled for the first time in 4 months. The extraction took 3 hours and transformed Maple Ridge Drive into a neighborhood event. By 6:15 a.m., 11 neighbors lined the sidewalk, phones out, recording as Mike's heavy-duty tow truck attached chains to the Mercedes's frame. Janet stood on her porch, coffee in hand, watching Karen pace and sob into her phone. Dr. Marcus Westbrook arrived at 6:52 a.m. in an Audi sedan, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and resignation as Janet presented him with the evidence binder she'd compiled. 4 months of security footage, 47 incidents, Instagram posts, text messages, missed client appointments with financial calculations, and the engineering report showing the driveway damage was caused by repeated heavy vehicle parking on an area not designed for that load. Marcus's jaw tightened as he read, and when he finally looked at his wife, the disappointment was visceral. $800 for the tow, Mike called out, wiping hydraulic fluid from his hands. Could have been $400 if she'd called when it first sank, but she kept trying to drive it out. Damaged the CV joints and bent the control arms. That's another $2,000 at the dealer. Marcus handed over his credit card without a word. At 7:30 a.m., Janet's attorney, Patricia Sellers, arrived with the notarized agreement. Karen signed with shaking hands, her mascara-streaked face red with humiliation as neighbors watched. The apology, she wrote, 3 times because Janet rejected the first 2 as insincere, sat on Janet's kitchen table. I, Karen Westbrook, apologize for repeatedly and knowingly trespassing on Janet Morrison's private property. I showed complete disregard for her business, her rights, and her dignity. I parked illegally because I believed rules didn't apply to me. I was wrong, entitled, and cruel. I will never return to this property or street. I am deeply sorry for my actions and the harm they caused. But the real punishment came from Marcus. Janet watched through her window as he spoke to his wife in the Audi, his voice low and furious. She caught fragments. 46 years old acting like a teenager. Jeopardized my practice. Kids see you on social media. The consequences rolled out over the following weeks through Diane, who proved remarkably forthcoming once freed from Karen's friendship. Karen was grounded, yes, grounded like a teenager, from the Mercedes for 6 months. Marcus drove it to work while Karen got the 2015 Honda Civic they'd bought for Brandon. She was banned from the country club pending a conduct review after Janet's documentation package arrived at the membership office. Most devastating, her Instagram account, 17,000 followers built on lifestyle envy, was deleted after several posts went viral in ways Karen hadn't intended, complete with comments like, "This you parking on someone's business?" and "Imagine being this entitled." 2 months later, on a mild November afternoon, Janet sat on her newly repaired driveway, a glass of iced tea sweating beside her folding chair. The concrete was perfect. She'd overseen the work herself, ensuring it could handle triple the Mercedes's weight. Her pool equipment gleamed behind the gate that now featured a new sign: "Private property. Violators will be prosecuted and engineered." Diane Chen walked over with a plate of cookies, settling into the chair beside her. "I should have stopped her sooner," Diane said quietly. "I was a coward." Janet squeezed her hand. "You stopped her when it mattered. That's what counts." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the afternoon sun paint shadows across the street, where the Mercedes would never park again. The story had spread through the neighborhood, then the county pool service network, then local social media. Janet's business had gained 12 new clients, people who specifically requested the pool lady who doesn't take crap from entitled parkers. Karen and Marcus still lived on Birchwood Lane, but Janet never saw the Mercedes there. Through the contractor grapevine, she'd heard they were selling the house, moving to a gated community where parking spaces were assigned and enforced. The irony wasn't lost on Janet. Karen was fleeing to a place with more rules because she couldn't handle the consequences of breaking them elsewhere. As for Karen herself, Diane reported she'd become almost invisible. No more surprise visits. No more social media presence. Just a woman who'd finally learned that private property meant private, and that some people you bully know exactly how to bury you 6 inches deep in your own arrogance. Janet sipped her tea and smiled, because justice, whether served through courtrooms or carefully engineered sinkholes, was equally satisfying. Across the country in Portland, Oregon, retired aerospace engineer Dr. Linda Kowalski was trimming her roses when a Tesla screeched into her driveway, blocking her garage. A woman in athleisure stormed out. "I need to charge my car." "You're not using your outlet." Linda looked up from her pruning shears, taking in the entitled demand, the expensive car, the assumption that a 72-year-old woman would simply comply. Then she smiled. The same smile that had once preceded presentations to NASA review boards, and pulled out her phone showing the home security system she'd designed herself, complete with facial recognition and license plate scanners. "Please," Linda said softly, "keep making demands. I haven't built a proper trap circuit in years, and your car's charging port looks like an excellent place to start." The woman's face went white. But that's a story for another time.